Are you tired of being tired, of being dehydrated and having no energy? Well, water is the answer. And it can also be the answer to our everlasting issue of finding a sustainable energy source.
Well, I'm Dr. Gallion, a hydropower specialist, and I'm here to tell you all about hydropower.
Hydropower can be defined as when flowing water is captured and turned into electricity. Water is constantly moving as a part of the water cycle, so it's just logical to harness the energy created by that to solve our sustainable energy problems. The simplest definition of hydropower would probably be the power that derives from the force of the energy of moving water, or the kinetic energy created by water flow. Now you might be asking yourself, is it renewable or non-renewable? Hydropower is renewable. It doesn't contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, and power plants are typically long-lasting and efficient. It also helps that hydropower's main fuel, water, doesn't need to be burned in order to create the energy, which helps with the reduced greenhouse gas emissions. Now let's get into how it works. There are a lot of different types of machinery used, but they're all powered by the kinetic energy of flowing water as it moves downstream. Turbines and generators convert the energy of the moving water into electricity, which is then fed to the electrical grid to be used by homes, businesses, and industries. There are three main types of hydropower plants: impoundment, diversion, and pumped storage. Some hydropower plants use dams, and some others don't. The first type of hydropower plant is called impoundment. This is the most common type, and when you think of hydropower, this is probably the one you think of. Basically, it uses a dam to store river water in a reservoir, and then water released from the reservoir flows through a turbine, spinning it, and that activates a generator to produce electricity. The good thing about this is that the water can be released at will, either to meet changing electricity needs or to maintain a constant reservoir level, so that gives us the power over our own energy. The next type is called diversion. This is sometimes called run-of-river, and it may or may not use a dam. Pretty much the facility channels a portion of a river through a different channel, and that leads to a production level where it runs through a generator, and that creates hydropower as well. The last type is called pumped storage. It pretty much works like a battery, storing the electricity generated by other power sources like solar, wind, and nuclear for later use. This stores the energy by pumping water uphill to a reservoir at a higher elevation from a second reservoir at a lower elevation. When the demand for electricity is low, a pumped storage facility stores energy by pumping water from a lower reservoir to an upper reservoir. During periods of high electrical demand, though, the water is released back to the lower reservoir, which turns a turbine, generating electricity. Now let's talk about an issue I know you're all thinking about, which is efficiency, both money-wise and energy-wise. Hydroelectric power happens to be very efficient and also quite inexpensive. In fact, modern hydropower turbines can convert as much as 90% of the available energy into electricity. The best fossil fuel plants are only about 50% efficient. Looking at things cost-wise, in the US, hydropower was produced for an average of 0.7 cents per kilowatt hour. This is about 1/3 the cost of using fossil fuel or nuclear and 1/6 the cost of using natural gas, as long as you don't factor in the cost for removing the dam and then the silt that it traps. Efficiency could also just be further increased by refurbishing hydroelectric equipment, but even that would be a really great investment. An improvement of only 1% would supply electricity to an additional 300,000 households, so hydroelectric power really is a great option.
Hydropower is also considered green because it emits fewer greenhouse gases than other fossil-based power sources. And though it does emit a few greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane, it doesn't emit as much as other fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas, so it's obviously the better choice. A downside to hydropower is that new plants are incredibly expensive to build, but it does require less maintenance after it's done. Also, low water levels and droughts can negatively impact the amount of electricity that is generated. Some fish species migrate when there is a food shortage or when the breeding season begins, and the building of dams could cut off their paths, which would lead to a lack of reproduction in those fish species. But who really actually likes fish? Dams can actually be used for our own entertainment and recreation. You and your family and friends can go boating, fishing, or swimming. And lastly, hydropower is a domestic source of energy, which means that each state can produce their own energy without being reliant on international fuel sources. Today, hydropower provides almost 1/5 of the world's electricity. China is the largest producer of hydropower, followed by Canada, Brazil, and the United States. The biggest hydropower plant in the United States is located in the Grand Coulee Dam on the Columbia River in northern Washington. More than 70% of the electricity made in Washington state is produced by hydroelectric facilities. If you want to switch over to hydropower right now, call 1-800-HYDROPOWER. That's 1-800-HYDROPOWER. If you call within the next 20 minutes, we can set you up with a free 1-month trial. If you want clean energy, call 1-800-HYDROPOWER.